Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this lecture. Humanity's systems of ethical values depend on the perception of the divine. The inability of reason in the West to prove the existence of God gave vent to an ethical skepticism where finally values are determined by the adopted narrative of a group. It is thus time for Africa to return to its strong value based on a scientific perception of the divine.
Welcome to the channel Zilalowa of Dr. Yaluka. To begin, please subscribe and tick the notification bell in order not to miss our videos. Thank you for joining.
As usual, in our lectures, we will start by the usual introduction, that is, the presentation of the lecturer, the speaker that I am, and the presentation of his academy, Zilaloa. We will then consider the evolution of ethical system of the West, which is being imposed on us. Next, thanks to the Kemetic cosmological argument, we will establish the scientific and normative nature of Ubuntu as a superior system of ethics. I'm Dr. Chatezwa Lubantajo Yaluka. I hold a PhD honor from Trinity Graduate School of Apologetics and Theology of Kerala in India. I'm thus an apologist. As such, I created Nzilalowa, a modern academy of African traditional spirituality. This academy comprises two branches: an academic branch called Institut des Sciences Animiques. Within the setting of this branch, the Institut des Sciences Animiques, I authored 50 works, including 15 books that are available at Amazon. Zilalowa comprises also an initiatory branch, which is called also Zilalowa. Within the setting of this branch, we introduce African people, Black people, to the divine practice of African traditional religion. I always emphasize that there are two kinds of practices of African traditional religion: the divine practice, which is based essentially on the purification of thoughts, and where is used the succor of holy ancestors, the ancestors of water. And we have the human practice, which is the practice of the majority of the Black people. This practice is the use of human power, that is, a power that can be used for good or for evil, while the divine power can be used only for good. So the human power is used in order to organize, elevate, and protect society. And in this second practice, the ancestors or the spirits that intervene are the spirits of nature. Bakulu Banseke or Bisimbi Bianseke. So we introduce African people to the divine practice because the divine practice is the basis of the Black civilization. The power which is developed in the divine for the purification of thought is perpetuated through faith in the human, has a human power, human spiritual power. We are a Kemetic movement by our reference to ancient Egypt, but ours we call neo-Kemetism, in contrast to all the other trends that we call traditional Kemetism. What is the difference between both? Traditional Kemetism started during the year 1970s in the United States, imposed by the work of Sheikh Anta Diop, the Senegalese Zionist. It is an eclectic movement that relies on induction and speculation to reread the ancient scriptures of the Egyptian in order to reintroduce their religion. Generally, it is an anti-Bible movement, and it is a religious belief, like all the religions of the world. The Neo-Kemetism movement started in the year 2008. It began in 2008 with the discovery of the Kemetic cosmological argument. This argument is a deductive statement of the essential doctrine of a salvational religion, which is congruent with the religion of ancient Egypt, of Sumer, and of the Congo religion, Congo. So it is the original nature of African traditional religion. Because we have a natural or systematic theology to deductive reasoning, we use comparative study in order to prove that the Kemetic cosmological argument of the natural systematic theology is congruent with the religion of ancient Egypt, as it is also congruent with the religion of Sumer. And because we can use comparative studies in order to determine what in the Bible has been taken from our civilization, from the Black people, we are not an anti-Bible movement. We don't buy the history and the culture that is in the Bible, but the spiritual principles are ours, and we claim them. The title of our lecture is Ubuntu, an African divine scientific normative ethics. We are at a turning point of history where the Black people are called to awake and to break away from the yoke of the West in the religious and scientific realms. This call for freedom implies the need to reconsider the ethical systems of values imposed to us by the West since the 15th century. It is a fact that the ethical system of a civilization depends on its perception of the divine. This perception in the West has gone from, first of all, an absolute confidence in the power of rationality to find the truth about everything, even about God. Next came the fact that this confidence was met by a delusionment in face of the inability of reason to prove the existence of God. These disillusionments led to the affirmation of the death of God by Nietzsche, that is, the need of strong personalities to impose their values. We all know the outcome of this, the massive killings of the Second World War has proven the danger of this position. Second, we have Jean-Paul Sartre, who came with his existentialism, where everyone is called to create his own value. Life being seen as having no objective meaning. Another trend in the West is postmodernism. This movement is not far from the existentialism. In front of the seeming impossibility to prove the existence of God, that is, the existence of an absolute moral value, postmodernism enthrones the narrative of a group. Any group can impose its narrative as determining the value for the group. Now, the problem with this is that as far as Africa is concerned, while the values are dictated in the Western society by the narrative of a group, these values tend to be imposed on the black people by the rule of the mightiest. Thus, it is very important for us to revisit the ethical system bequeathed by our ancestors and affirm its scientific value as inducing a universal normative validity for us. The knowledge of the divine and of how to bring back the broken unity, the broken relationship between the human being and the divinity, which knowledge is called religion. This knowledge has always been the underpinning element of all knowledge among the black people. This knowledge is the backbone of the African principle of Ubuntu. The principle of Ubuntu is anchored in the double nature of the divinity of human being that can be demonstrated thanks to the Kemetic cosmological argument. For the sake of this lecture, I can introduce the Kemetic cosmological argument this way. I'm an individual being, you are individual beings, therefore this temporal universe is an aggregate of individuality. Therefore, it is an individual entity. Being an individual entity has, an effect. This temporal universe is the effect of an individual cause. Now, the individual nature of this cause begs the existence of other similar causes that may have not yet created their respective universes, but they exist. Therefore, we have potential causes and effective causes. Here I introduce an hypothesis. The hypothesis is that every creation abides in its creator. Provided this hypothesis, let us consider an entity that includes all the potential and effective causes. Normally, this entity is the greatest possible being because any creation you can imagine will be in its cause, and this cause will be in this greater entity. So, this greater entity is the most high. Thus, we will introduce some attribute of the most high. Being the greatest possible entity, the most high must be indivisible and immutable. If he were not, there might be a principle of his divisibility and mutability, and that principle must be greater than him, which is impossible because he is the greatest possible entity. Moreover, the Most High must be transcendent. By transcendent, we not only mean that he is above everything, we mean also that he doesn't know evil. Because within the setting of his absolute indivisibility, in God, in the Most High, to know and to be are the same thing. Therefore, if the Most High had the knowledge of evil, he will be infinitely good and infinitely bad, which is impossible. So the Most High is transcendent, indivisible, he is absolutely immutable. Now we have seen that each cause, each cause expresses an individuality which is included in the Most High. Now, the Most High is indivisible. Hence, we come to the conclusion that each cause expresses the fullness of God, of the Most High, but in an individual manner. From now on, we will call the Most High God. By God, we don't mean the Western divinity. No, by God, we mean what is introduced by the Kemetic cosmological argument, or what is explained by the Kemetic cosmological argument, as the greatest possible being who is the ultimate cause, transcendent, immutable, and indivisible. And we can call each cause as children or child of God. And the fullness of God, which is expressed by every child of God, we call it the Logos. So we have three celestial entities. We have the Most High, God, the children of God, and we have the Logos. If you compare with ancient Egypt, you will have the solar has the Most High, That is the way he is called in the pyramid text. You have Atom in the theology of Memphis. You have Atom, which is a sun, because he expresses the full glory of God. And we have the Logos, who is called Ta. If you take Bukongo, the Congo religion, you have the same theism, where you have the Most High president, who is called Zamyampungu Tulendo. We have the Loa, one of those Loa, all the children of God. One of them is called Bumba Loa, and Bumba Loa is the creator of this temporal universe. And the Logos is called Binanja. So we have exactly the same theism. Now, let me introduce the point of cosmology. I can enlarge, I can extend this explanation to the essential doctrines of salvational religion, of solar religion. But for the sake of this lecture, we will stop there and introduce the point of cosmology. The point here is the answer to the question, where does this temporal universe exist in relation to God the Most High? It cannot exist within God the Most High, because if it were, then at the moment of creation, something in God will go from nothingness to existence. Then God will change, which is impossible because God is absolutely immutable. It cannot be outside of God, because if it were, then added to God, it will result in an entity greater than God, which is also impossible. So the temporal universe neither exists within God, neither outside of God. It is like I tell you, Mr. X, who is in this studio with me, has a car, but his car is neither in this studio nor out of this studio. The answer is simple. His car is in his mind. So this temporal universe is in its creator, which is the proof of our hypothesis. In other words, the visible universe is only an appearance of the invisible universe. In other words, reality is spiritual. The visible is just an appearance. This is a scientific statement because it has been reached through deduction. In epistemology, when you have a set of deductive coherent truths, you have what is called an exact science. Thus, proof has been given to you that African traditional religion, in its original trend, the Egyptian trend, and in its Congo trend, in Bukongo, the Congo religion, is an exact science. Now, we have seen that the Logos is the fullness of God, which is manifested in each child of God in heaven. However, if you take children of God, children of God, around one of them, these collective children of God constitute a collective child of God. And this collective child of God has also the Logos in him. Thus, we come to the conclusion that there is a double nature of the Logos, whereby it is the manifestation of the fullness of God in the child of God and the manifestation of the fullness of God around the child of God. Double pattern. Now, because the Logos is the fullness of reality in the child of God, It constitutes also the true nature of the child of God. Therefore, according to the double pattern, the double nature of the Logos, the true nature of the child of God is the Logos which is expressed within him, as it is also the Logos which is expressed around him. In other words, the child of God is the good God expresses in him, as he is the good that God expresses around him. Now we have seen that everything in the temporal realm is just an appearance of a reality in the celestial level. So you and me are the temporal manifestation of children of God. In other words, we are in reality right now in heaven, children of God. So, according to the double nature of the Logos, you and I are in reality the good. We are spiritually conscious in us, as we are also the good. We are spiritually conscious around us. I repeat, you and I, every human being, is in reality the good. He is spiritually conscious in him, as he is also the good. He is spiritually conscious around him. This is the basis of the principle of Ubuntu. You are what you are spiritually conscious around you. This implies that you have to care not only by yourself, but about the nature that surrounds you, about your environment, because the good that is expressed in that environment defines you. We learn from this development that Ubuntu is a science. It is a branch of the natural systematic theology of African traditional religion, which I tell you, which I have proven to you, is an exact science. This branch informs the black people of the moral value of love for oneself, love for the community, as well as love for nature. Like the human being it surrounds, nature is a muntu. Nature is a muntu, a conscious being. Stanstrom puts it this way. I quote him: the forces that operate on the strictly human level are considered to be identical to those operating on the periphery, to those surrounding you and I. Thus, the muntu, the human being, is called to not to dominate nature, but to act toward nature in accordance to his divinity. That is, in accord with divine law and truth. Nature is at our service, but requires also our care. me give you an example that shows that nature has a spirit, has a soul, which is similar to the spirit and soul of human being, similar in kind but different in quantity. Similar in kind but different in quantity. The example I give you is the example of one called Tomaduma. Tomaduma was a cleric during the colonial time. We are in the year 1921. The big Congo prophet Simon Kimbangu began to work, his work of healing and prophecy. Tomaduma went to Nkamba, the village of Nkamba, where the prophet was operating, and he typewritten all he has seen there and typewritten the biography of Simon Kimbangu, which is available today in internet. And he went back home. He was living at Kisantu. But after he went back, the police came and arrested everybody in Kamba. The village was besieged by the police, and the prophet fled with his disciple. Thus began the, the underground part of the mission of the activity of Simon Kimbangu. It was during that underground phase of his activity that Tomaduma decided to go back to meet Simon Kimbangu. What he didn't know, it was that noise was whispered here and there that Duma has betrayed Simon Kimbangu. So whenever he will arrive in the village, everybody will flee, and they will let himself in the village. He arrived in another village, it was the same. Everybody ran, and he remained himself. He sat, he began to ponder, what shall I do? At that moment, nature came to his help. Yeah, nature, because nature has a spirit, nature has a soul. He saw a bird circling around his head. He looked at the bird and he said, this bird has something to tell me. The bird kept on circling, and at a moment he went away. It went away. After a while, the bird came back, and the bird let fall a mouse. Tomaduma looked at the mouse, and the mouse was looking at Tomaduma. Tomaduma said, this is a message that the bird carried to me, but what does it mean? At that moment, thought came to him. The mouse is like an arrow. By his pointed head and by his tail, a mouse is an arrow. And he understood that that arrow, which is the mouse, was showing him in what direction he must go in order to meet Simon Bangu in the forest. This he did. He went in the forest and he met the prophet. So nature is a muntu. I won't say a human being because the muntu is not a human being. The muntu is a conscious being. So nature is conscious. Ubuntu is not an inert doctrine. No, Ubuntu is a power of life that must enables us to bring healing in our strange relationships with others. These make me these bring back to me the story of a lady that we will call Benny. Benny just married a young man. At the beginning, everything was smooth, especially when they were fiancés. He was considerate and loving. Once Benny was in his house, he became kind of brutal. He was They were quarreling every time. He was insulting Benny, and every time he was being seen with girls with whom he was working. So it was a case of brutality and infidelity. Benny knew the principle of Ubuntu can work if it is brought into the relationship. So she got in touch with a spiritual healer, and the spiritual healer used that principle to understand, to affirm that the couple was governed by the law of Ubuntu, and that law was enforcing love and truth in Benny and around Benny. That law was governing every act of her husband. To pray is to purify oneself, to call upon the holy ancestors, to deny the so called activity of witchcraft, and then to affirm the truth about the situation and deny the opposite. Now, in this case, the truth about the situation was that the law of Ubuntu was governing nature in the husband of Betty and around him, so that everybody has to be considerate for this couple and help them instead of disturbing them, so that the husband of Benny has to act only according to truth and love. The result of this affirmation and negation of the opposite was that the situation was resolved. The husband of Benny recognized his mistake and promised to Benny we will not quarrel anymore, and harmony was settled. Has a spiritual healing power. Ubuntu impels the realization in our consciousness of the activity of the Logos, of the fullness of the divinity in our neighbors as well as in nature. The Logos alone really acts in nature, acts in your surrounding, and it acts for your good. In conclusion, it is time for the Black people to awake and defend the higher values bequeathed by our ancestors, being based on the natural systematic theology. It is an exact science. Ubuntu is normative. It is a superior value to be defended and opposed to any speculative system of ethics that Western world tries to impose on us. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share. More on this subject can be found on my books available at Amazon.